Welcome back, my friends, and let's go a little further now and let's see what Jesus taught us, on human nature. Okay, now before we get on this topic right away, I would like to share with you, a few hunches. Okay, man, has always had a hunch, from way back, that he's endowed, with something else than the body that had the attractive quality of defying death. So, the idea is that, in the past, when people, didn't know too much, they used to be very superstitious. So their observations, were, minor observations. For example, a slight breeze, actually shaking a tree, they would think, this is coming, from God, for example. Or they find a disturbance in the water, that could see no fish. And then all of a sudden, they would think, there is something behind it. Yeah. But you have to understand this. This is just a primitive way of thinking about something, they could not understand. Yeah. But if you go to Plato, for example, it goes a little deeper. He says, that man is always dealing, with a changing environment. Okay. Now, the idea is, why is man always haunted, with finding an ideal state of affairs? He should be used, to deal with a changing environment. Why does it always stick, to an ideal state of affairs? If it weren't for something outside the body itself, not subject to change. So these are the primitive hunches. Now the idea, I'll add, two of my hunches. The first one deals with the fact that man dreams. What does that mean? Okay, the dream is usually a kind of like an experience that is similar to life itself, the way we live it. But of course, with it, it's a different, it's a different feeling. And sometimes the feeling, is even more intense, than you're feeling, in regular life. But what does it mean? It just means, that, okay, the first time you see something or you experience something, okay, it comes from without because it is a stimuli. When you look at it, it is from outside your body. Okay. Then you go to the labs, and some physicist or biologist, what they've done, they actually put electrodes in a subject's brain, and they subject, the areas in the brain that are known, to be tied into the dreams or dreams processing. They put the electrodes there, and then the subject, experience, the same feelings that they had in the dream. But again, here, when you look at it, it comes from outside because it comes from the electrodes. It doesn't come from the body itself. See? And then, if they gave the guy, instead of the electrodes, they gave him a chemical stimulation, the same thing. He starts, looking at certain things, that he experienced during his life or everyday living, but it's still, influenced, by something from outside. So the first stimulus comes from outside, the electrode stimulation comes from outside, and the chemical stimulation comes from outside. So chances are that any recurrence of the dream, will come from outside also. Now this is, as I said, at this point, it's only my hunch. Another one of my hunch is the fact, that the man lies. What does it mean, man lies? Well, man is always, you know, in contact with the environment. Okay? And then what happens, you know, is that everything that happens, you know, he is actually acknowledging the environment. Well, the idea is that man is known to ignore the environment. For example, they put the guy, you know, in extreme temperatures of hot and cold, and, you know, well, it is not a natural way of living. I mean, the way to live, you know, is always, you know, to just kind of take water and drink it. But say, for example, you know, to go into an icy water in a lake, or, for example, you know, to go into a very intense heat, you know, in the desert and staying there, well, how does it help? You know, you are ignoring the environment. Instead of protecting yourself, you're just daring it. Huh? And for example, boxing. Somebody who boxes, you know, what is the survival benefit of boxing? You know, but there is something even more dramatic than that. Man is the only species that can say, hey, you know what? I can put it in my mind that environment does not exist. I can live by saying, okay, that tree in front of me does not exist. I can even paint, you know, the scenery that I see in front of me without, you know, what is in front of me, and add to it what might be behind, and so on and so on. So the idea is that the body, you know, being designed to adjust to the environment, how come all of a sudden, you know, it decides to ignore the environment? Have you ever seen, for example, you know, a tiger, you know, actually walking into a tree? Never. Why? Because the tree is right in front of him, you know, and then he cannot ignore him. But man, you know, can ignore the environment and try to, you know, to actually reshape the environment to his liking. Okay? Now, how come, you know, the body right there, you know, after, you know, he has been designed, you know, to actually deal, you know, with a changing environment, all of a sudden, you know, he decides, you know, he doesn't want that environment anymore. So the ignoring of an environment cannot come from the body by himself. Why? Because it is designed to deal with the environment. So to ignore the environment, it has to come from something, you know, outside the body. Okay, that's my second hunch. Okay, now, let's go now, you know, to see what Jesus has to say on the matter, you know, and go to saying number 15. Huh? He will not enter the kingdom, he who was not born twice. The first is the natural birth of the body, and the second is that of the soul in the field of knowledge. Okay, now, something new here. Now if I come and say, okay, he says that, you know, you have the body and you have a soul, everybody knows that, there is no problem. But what is the relationship now between the body and the soul that actually composes, you know, human nature? The thing that is new, that Jesus is trying to convey here, is that the soul is like the body born. Now this is a new concept. Nobody ever thought about it like this. We always thought, you know, God just put, you know, the soul, you know, in our body, but leave this at the side because it has nothing to do with what Jesus is trying to convey in this verse. Huh? Okay, the idea now is, okay, we have to put it in our mind that the soul, you know, is born like the body. But how? In the field of knowledge. But what is a field of knowledge? Okay, actually the field, just the field, it's a sphere of influence that surrounds a force outside the focal point of the force. See? So now, when you start thinking a little bit, everything we know goes into our head. You know, okay, for now, you know, just for now, we know that the brain, you know, is involved, you know, in the processing of everything, you know, we receive from the environment. Okay? So, actually the brain, you know, will be actually the focus of all our knowledge that comes to it. Eh? Every bit of information that hits, you know, the brain, well, that will be the knowledge that comes from the environment. Okay, so actually, the field of knowledge, as it is deeply involved, you know, with the brain processing it, you know, will be actually it will be all, you know, in the vicinity of the brain. Okay? So actually, the field of knowledge will be a field that surrounds the brain, because the brain, you know, is the one that gathers, you know, all the information we get from the environment. Okay? So if you read the verse again, it will be the natural, of course, the first is the natural body, birth of the body, everybody knows that. The second is that of the soul. In the field of knowledge will be a field that actually surrounds the brain. And now we're going to go into the steps, you know, to understand this. Eh? Okay, so if you go to 16 and 17, it starts going into the process of the birth of the soul. There is a rebirth and an image. One must indeed be reborn through the image. Okay? Go a little bit into 17. I, though existing, came out of the existing, being an image of He that exists. I caused that image to come out of He that exists. Okay, so the soul, he said, you know, that the soul is born. Okay, now there is a rebirth. The rebirth will be actually the birth of the soul. Why? Because, you know, the birth of the body, you know, is always comes first. Okay, and there is an image. An image here, it's a duplicate. So, okay, now these are all new concepts. The birth of the soul is a new concept, and then the image, which is, you know, actually an image of what? Now we're going to get into it as we go. You know, one must indeed be reborn to the image. In other words, you know, the soul, you know, when it is born, it will be born as a duplicate. Okay, now we're going to know a duplicate of what? Look at this. I, though existing, came out of the existing. Now look at this. First, you know, you have the body. The body is the existing. The I, just for now, you know, consider it that it is the soul. So I, the soul, although I'm existing in the form of a body, I came out of the existing. That means I came out of the body. Being an image of that he that exists, that means I came out of the body, being a duplicate of that body. See? I repeat that. I, though existing, came out of the existing. The body is existing. So the I is actually the soul, because you cannot say I, though existing, came out. Okay, what is the body is going to come out of? You can't. Here Jesus, you know, talks about the birth of the body and the soul. So to read this, you know, you have to understand it. It's I, the soul, though existing in the form of a body, came out of the existing. That means came out of the body, being an image or a duplicate of He that exists. That means being a duplicate of the body. So here, you know, you have all kinds of new concepts. You have actually the birth of the soul, then you have a duplicate, and then he goes and says it's not a duplicate of an environment, no, it is a duplicate of the body. Okay, and then in number 18 you say, I am His image, I came out of His light. Here, you know, you have another new concept, which means when it came out of the body, it came not only, not out of the body as, you know, as the body comes out of a womb. No, it came out of the light. See? And then look at number 19, goes a little bit further. I sent forth an image of light that I myself placed about me. So here the I is no longer, is not the soul. I is the body. I, the existing body, sent forth a duplicate of light that I myself, the body himself, placed about me. That means put it around the brain. And that's so here, you put all of it together, and you see, every step you take is a new concept, and you have to kind of so actually, out of all this, what's the first conclusion you can come up with? Okay, the first conclusion will be a concept that says that the soul is a duplicate of the body that emerges from its light, then placed into orbit around it, and then when you go back to the number 15 that started, the chapter, you come to say, okay, it comes at a sphere of influence, which will be the sphere of influence of the brain. So here, everything that occurs in the vicinity of the brain. So all this, when you first think about it, it sounds like science fiction. But you know what? I can tell you something. That the body has a light of its own could be demonstrated, with the Kirlian photography. Okay, Kirlian photography is a Kirlian apparatus. It is done. It is actually formed, with two plates, and the two plates are kind of like one positive and one negative, and then they have the film on the positive side, and it creates an electric field, right in that area, between the two, actually the two electrodes. So what happens, when you put anything in that electric field, it shows right away that it has an aura. That means, that the whole thing around, it's nothing but an aura, which is like a kind of like a band of light that surrounds the whole body. Now that is called the Kirlian apparatus, and the photograph, when they develop the film, is called a Kirlian photograph. So it's a photograph of anything you put in there. It will show that it has an aura of light around it. Now, if that's okay, and then you see Jesus coming, to this step, in his explanation, of human nature, well, suppose even, that there is a light. Where does the light come from? Okay, look at this now. Yeah, look at this now. Truth did not come into the world naked, but it came in images. These are visible to man, but the light which is within them is hidden. Now, this saying, is made out of two parts. Let's talk about the first part first. Truth did not come into the world naked, but it came in images. These are visible to men, but the light which is within them is hidden. Now, think a little bit about this. The idea here is that when something is in front of you, you see it, and it's an image. So everything you see in the environment is an image. But, say for example, if you're in a room, and then you have, the picture, of your living room, for example. If you turn all the lights out, you will not see it. That image of your living room, if you turn off the light, you will not see it. Yet, when you turn the light on, you will see it. Now, when you don't see it, you cannot say it is not there because you do not see it. No, it is still there. But you cannot be aware of it. You cannot see it. Okay? So, what you see then, it is not actually the image. If you say, I'm only going to see an image, it is not actually an image. It's an image plus its light. See, it's a set. Okay, now you know that the image, ends up, in our retina, and then it's being processed, to go into a part of the brain. That part you know. But the idea now, what happens to the light? See, what you have seen is no longer, now remember this, what you have seen is not just the image. It is the image plus its light. You know where the image itself goes, but what happens to the light? See? Okay? Now, we will get back to the second part of 20 in a second, but now look at this. Here, you have an atom. Okay, the atom, has a nucleus in the middle, then you have the electrons going around it. These are electrons' orbits. Now, the saturation of the electron orbits go like this: 2, 8, 8, 16, 16, 32, 32. That means the first orbit, cannot take more than 2. Second orbit cannot take more than 8. Third orbit cannot take more than 8 either. So if you add the orbits, of course, it doesn't go like this. Usually it goes like that, going every which way, but they never collide. So here, these are the saturation numbers, that are related, to the electron orbits. Okay, now in the nucleus you have protons and neutrons in the nucleus. Electrons, go outside. Now, see, here, same thing, proton and neutron. Now, the idea here is that when the electron orbit is saturated, it's called a rest state. So if you have, like, say, for example, 2, 8, and then 8 here, and then you go by this progression, it's called a rest state. Now, the idea now is that if, by any chance, this electron right now, absorbs a unit of light, which is a photon, it has, when it absorbs the light will give him enough energy to jump from its rest state. So it's going to go into an excited state. See? Okay. So when it goes into an excited state, at a later time, he can lose, it can go back, to the rest state. Why? Because the electron orbit, is designed, to always go to towards the saturation point. So now you know that if it goes to a different orbit, then you're going to have 7 electrons here. Okay, when you have 7 electrons here, then the atom itself as a whole, will have a potential, to regain that electron. So, but the problem here is that by going back to its original state, which is the rest state, it's going to emit that unit of light that actually he took from the beginning to go to the excited state. So anytime anything goes to an excited state, to a rest state, it will emit a unit of light. Okay. Now, the idea here, let's go back to verse number 20. Truth did not come into the world naked, but it came in images. These are visible to man, but the light which is within them is hidden. Okay. The light, we end up, seeing things. Okay, as I said, we see the things, which is an image and its light. Now consider a little bit. The images, actually, they are a set, which is image plus light. Now, they get transferred to the brain where they get processed. Okay, so look at the way to look at it is that they are outside the body, and then they get transferred to to the brain. So it is as if, they went from an excited state to the brain, which is a resting state. Now, if they went from outside somewhere else, not in the body, that doesn't count. But if the image goes to the brain and stays in the brain, being transferred in electric impulses and then so on and so on, then it is as if, the images that you got from the environment have moved, from an excited state to a resting state within the brain. So what's going to happen? Well, it's exactly, if it does that, it will emit a unit of light at the level of the resting state, which means at the level, of the brain itself. So every time you see something, that picture that you saw has its light emitted, at the level, of the brain. So that's why, a small little photon or nothing, it's very, very, very tiny, by looking at everything, and, you see the same thing, through different angles, and you're always in motion, throughout the universe and throughout the environment. For us, the environment, and then the universe for some other people. But throughout the environment, we always see images everywhere. Every time we see an image, well, there goes, a unit of light, and that's why it accumulates, right there by the brain or by the body, since the whole body is covered, with a band of light. But that light is not just a photon; it's a photon that is relative to the images we see. And that's very important to remember that. Okay? And no wonder, that by looking at everything that we can, through our, through our vision, we end, the light ends up, growing and growing and growing until it becomes an aura, that covers, the whole body. Okay, now, if we go back to the second part of the verse number 20, it is a very curious part, because look at this. In the image of the light of the Father, this light will be revealed, but his image will be veiled by his light. Okay, now try to understand now. Look at this. In the image of the light of the Father. Now, as we said before, up to now, it is the body that gives birth to the soul. So, it is the way to look at it is that the body has fathered the soul. Okay? So, if you read it that way, then you will see, in the image of the light of the Father, which means in the image of the light of the body, this light will be revealed. Now, you might as well say, in the image of the light of the Father, you can use that part right here by saying, in the Kirlian photograph of the Father, which means in the Kirlian photograph of the body, this light, which is the aura, will be revealed. But his image will be veiled by his light, which means, that the image of the body is what Jesus said so far is the soul itself, because the soul is a duplicate of the body. So, his duplicate, that means, but his soul will be veiled by his light. Although the soul is made up of light, of photons, it will be covered up or overwhelmed, with the light of the body, which means the aura itself. So as you can see, this second part, it's giving, at least partial support, to the Jesus' concept that there is a light hidden in the images we see. Okay, now, if we go now to 21 and 22. He who appears is called the one who is below. and he to whom the hidden belongs is that one who is about it. There is an inner and an outer, and then outside the outer, outside which there is nothing. Okay, the word inner, wait for it for now, you know, just disregard it, we'll get back to it. Now, look at number 22. If people ask you, where have you come from? Tell them, we have come from the light, where the light has originated through itself until it revealed itself in our image. Okay, now let's understand this. When you look at this graph, okay, look at the soul looking down. The body is he who appears, and the one above him is the one to whom the hidden belongs. So, now, when you look from the body up, Jesus says there is an outer and then outside the outer, outside which there is nothing. Now, when you can see from here, there is an outer. Here is the body and there is the soul. According to the body, you know, there is a soul which is an outer. But what is the meaning of outside the outer? Okay, to understand this, we have to go to how the soul is, you know, is born. Okay, now here is the body, and the body is surrounded, you know, by an aura. So, we are not fixed in the universe. We are always in constant motion. First, you know, we're rotating, you know, with the earth. The earth rotates, you know, around the sun. So, we are always in constant motion. And then, now, the aura, of course, you know, moves with us. Comes a point when the aura grows denser, a chunk of it escapes from the aura and it starts orbiting the brain in the form of a cloud of light. Consider this the conception of the soul, the first phase of the birth of the soul. Then, after that, it keeps going around the brain here, and that cloud starts to fall under gravitational collapse, exactly like a star does, like let's say, for example, an interstellar dust cloud, same thing. It stays as a cloud, you know, for a long, long time, until then, you know, it starts shrinking. It starts collapsing towards the middle in a form of a cone. Here it will be the same thing. The soul here, you know, will be a proto-soul, and the first step, it will be a proto-soul, not exactly the complete soul. Now, if it starts, you know, shrinking while in orbit around the brain, it starts shrinking towards the middle, up until it becomes the soul proper, which is going to be a duplicate of the body itself. So that's how the soul is born. Now, if you notice, when you compare these two graphs here, the soul is no longer by itself. In other words, you cannot say this is a soul. Because the soul now, you know, the way it was born, it started as a proto-soul, and it ended up, you know, with a soul proper in the midst of an environment. So here, you know, you have a soul composed with two parts. The soul proper, which is a duplicate of the body, and it is surrounded by an environment, exactly like the body is in the middle of an environment. It is always surrounded, you know, by the environment. That's why Jesus, when he looks at it like this, and you look from the body up, it will no longer be an outer. You're going to see right away it will be an outer and then outside the outer. Of course, outside which there is nothing. So here is, let's go a little bit further with a summary of what Jesus has said so far. The model of man, as depicted by Jesus, provides the former with a soul in addition to his body. This soul originates from the body alone, without it resorting to a mating partner as in sexual reproduction. It is clearly a case of an asexual reproduction, and the process starts when the body becomes aware of its environment. When the pictures man sees reach his brain, they emit a unit of light, and this emission gradually builds up into the aura that surrounds the entire body. As the portion of the aura surrounding his brain grows denser, its condition favors the escape of a chunk of its material that ends up orbiting the brain as a cloud of light. Soon after its separation, this cloud starts shrinking, forming a core at the center that evolves into the soul proper. And because this is a case of asexual reproduction, the soul evolves into a duplicate of the body it originates from. Okay, now let's go a little further on this. This summarizes the whole concept beautifully. When you make the two one, that is, when you make the male and the female into a single one, so that the male will not be male and the female not be female. And when you make the outside as the inside and the above as the below, that is, when you make eyes in the place of an eye and a hand in the place of a hand and a foot in the place of a foot and an image in the place of an image, then shall you be ready to enter. Okay, what does all this means? Okay, when you make the two one, that is, when you make the male and the female into a single one, what does it mean? It means that we just said that the soul is born asexually, that means without any mating partner. In other words, the birth of the soul entails the joining of the functions of the male and the female into a single one, because it evolves asexually. Okay? And then now if a male if a male gives birth to a soul and the female gives birth to a soul, I mean alone, without having to actually mate together, then actually there is no difference between a male and a female, because they both give birth to the soul alone. So it becomes a clone. It is no longer a creation of both of them getting together like in the birth of the body. And then the rest of it, and when you make the outside as the inside and the above as the below, we're going to get to this. But look at the duplication here. That is, when you make eyes in the place of an eye and a hand and a foot, all this, shows that there is a duplication of the body. So the birth, Jesus says, the birth of the soul, results, in an exact duplicate, of the body. But now, if you go back to the outside and the inside and the above as the below, it is very, very interesting, because when you make the outside as the inside, it is easier, to look at something that is outside of you as if you're looking at it from the inside. So the inside will be actually the body, and the outside will be the soul. But the above as the below, it is a little different. The difference here is that the below and the inside is the same thing, is the body. But what is the difference, between the inside and the below? It is because the below is no longer the body by himself. The below is in the body in the middle of an environment. See? So to duplicate this, the soul, will have to be in the middle of an environment. That is why at the end of the verse, when he goes through this duplication of everything, it is not enough, to say, okay, it will be a duplicate of the body. But it has to come in and say it's an image in the place of an image. That means an environment in the place of an environment. So this is, what is meant, by the whole thing. Okay, now let's go a little bit further here. If people ask you, what is the sign of your Father in you? Tell them, it is a movement and a rest. Cleave the wood, I am there. Cut the stone, and you will find me there. Now, let's try to explain this. If people ask you, what is the sign of the Father in you? The difficulty here is that preposition in. I don't think Jesus said it with in. My strong feeling that I have is that Jesus has written in, and he said it with and. A small little change in preposition. So it's just a little manipulation. But look at the way it sounds then. If people ask you, what is the sign of your Father and you? Okay? In other words, if people ask you, what is the sign of your body and your soul? So tell them it's a movement and a rest. See, there is a rest, which is the body, and the movement around it, which is the soul that is orbiting the brain. Now, cut the stone and you will find me there, and cleave the wood and I am there. There is two ways to understand this. When you said that it's a movement and a rest, Jesus, is pinpointing, to the atomic structure of matter. You have something like a nucleus, it's something at rest, and you have motion around it. Okay? Atomic structure of matter. If you cleave the wood, you can think of it, okay, if you go to the smallest part of the wood, you will find, an atomic structure of matter, which is the atom. And the same thing, with the stone. But there is another way to understand it too, is that if you cleave the wood, you're going to have two parts, one smaller than the other. Okay? So if you hold them, in your hand, you have the body here, and you have take a piece of wood, take a larger piece, in one hand, and the smaller piece, around. Look at this, it looks like an atomic structure of matter. Same thing with the stone. You cut, if you cut the stone, you're going to have a large piece right here, you have a small piece right there. So when you look at it, it looks like an atomic structure of matter. That's what is meant, by this saying. Okay? And then, look at this. Now he's going to talk about the characteristic of the soul. When you make the two one, you shall become sons of men. And when you say mountain be moved, it will be moved. And then the word of the soul is an image without a model. Now let's try to explain this and try to understand it. When you make the two one, that means when you join the functions of both male and female into a single one, that means when you give birth to your soul asexually, you shall become sons of men. That means your soul will become the son of your body. And when that happens, you can say to the mountain, be moved, it will be moved. But everybody knows that has lived long enough that, if you want a mountain to move, it ain't going to move. But you can do that with a Gedanken experiment of Einstein. That means you can think it. So one of the characteristics of the soul is its power to think. So when people, tell you, that you actually think with your brain, it is an inaccuracy. When you think with your soul. And then another characteristic of the soul, the word of the soul is an image without a model. What does it mean? Actually, when you see something, it is a stimulus. It is a model in front of you. Okay? And then when you look at it and it turns into the brain, it gets processed and everything, and then, well, the image comes from outside and it gets into the brain, but actually the image itself has a model. Why? Because the model is outside the body. But when it says the word of the soul is an image without a model, that means it is an image that is inside of you that does not have a model outside of you. When that happens, it becomes a memory. So here it says that the word of the soul is actually a memory. So there is two characteristics of the soul. One, its power to think, and one, it is the seat of long-term memories. Okay. All this usually, when you come to think of it, it has always been unacceptable to science, because you cannot explain it, scientifically. But there is an experiment that I want to, bring to your attention, and it was made by a physicist by the name of Roy John, and he had a very nice experiment. It's right here, here is the subject, and he actually implanted the subject's brain with 3 electrodes, A, B, and C. Okay, here he had 2 stimuluses. There is stimulus 1, which is this, and stimulus 2, which is this. Okay? Associated with the stimulus 1 was behavior 1, and then associated with stimulus 2 was this behavior. One was a left turn, one was a right turn. Okay, every time, he subjected, the subject, to stimulus 1, he always, showed the behavior number 1, turning left. And then same thing, with stimulus 2. The guy turned right. Now, what happens then is that he found out that a percentage of these behaviors did not go according to this. So, for example, he showed the guy stimulus 1 and he made a right turn. So he decided, well, if that's the case, then the behavior could not have been elicited with actually the stimulus 1. It was elicited by stimulus 2. But the idea here, is that, okay, where did, now if we presented the subject, with stimulus 1, where did this come from? Well, it had to come from the memory of stimulus 2. That was the key. Okay? So, when he did this, he compared then the electric impulses from these 3 sites for the stimulus number 1 and for the error, which is actually stimulus number 2. Now, he said that if we compare the two, we can find a kind of like a common error in the 3 sites that actually contributed, to showing, the wrong behavior. When he did this, he found out, he was extremely surprised because he found out that something, was extremely unusual. He found out that the error appeared at the 3 sites simultaneously. Now, he said that the conduction, which is the conduction from cell to cell, between these sites, it seemed possible. It takes longer than spontaneity to reach, each other. So he came to a conclusion that I would like to read to you. I don't know if I put it here, but I did not. Okay, I'll have to read it to you from my notes. I'm sorry, I'm gonna read it to you from my notes so that it will be easier. Okay. That was the result of his study. Examination of the data reveals an unexpected and intriguing fact. within the limits of time resolution available with the computer parameters used in analysis of the data, the release of the memory component occurs with approximate simultaneity in the region studied, which is A, B, and C. The distance between these various anatomical regions are so great as to preclude the possibility of propagated conduction within them in so short a period. Furthermore, the shape of the memory component released from some of these structures is highly similar. So, the conclusion, either the simultaneous emergence of the memory component is due to common influence exerted by an unknown distant structure, or the representational system comprising the memory of the previous experience involves all the structure. When you say, it involves all the structure, it does not explain, how it went, from A to C in so short a period of time. So the second possibility, it's actually an impossibility. So it says, it is due to a common influence exerted by an unknown distant structure. And it goes without saying that Jesus would agree that that common influence exerted by an unknown distant structure is nothing but the influence of the system of the soul prior to or following his birth.